I'm Ben Elowitz, and this is Razor's Edge. Way back when I was a CEO for the first time and I was raising money for my first company, I felt a ton of pressure to act like I had everything figured out. And it felt like VCs, like they like founders who project tons of certainty. And so I tried to present my company like it was way more finished, way more dialed in than it really was. The problem was the business was still evolving. Investors could see right through all the parts that I was trying to polish over. It turns out there is a much better way to handle this. And my guest today, Russ Fradin, is an expert at assessing his company's weak spots head on before he pitches investors. Russ founded and led Adify and Dynamic Signal. He's now the CEO and co-founder of Larridin. He has raised over $1 billion across his companies, and he's guided his businesses through multiple M&As. Russ's secret is in his relentless approach to making his companies investable in the first place. He is not about flashy pitch decks. He's not about mind games. He is about knowing the truth of your business and being willing to say that out loud, warts and all. For Russ, candor is the foundation of successful fundraising. So if you find yourself hand-waving and avoiding inconvenient truths when you pitch, your issue is not the pitch. It's a sign you need to sharpen your business before you're going to convince anyone else to invest. This conversation with Russ is all about dropping the act, getting totally honest, and using candid, straight-shooting authenticity with yourself and with investors. Enjoy. Love to have this conversation with you. Totally appreciated our conversation the other day. I love that you and I both have this multi-generational kind of perspective on these things too. It's just to get things going, some fun, quick, lightning questions with you to kind of get in the spirit. So number one, is fundraising a relationship or a transaction?
Normally, in a great world, it's a relationship. Most of the time, there's different times in different market cycles where it's definitely more of a transaction, but at its best, at its core, certainly at the early stage, it's a relationship.
What would you say is the biggest green flag in an investor?
I think while you're in the meeting, the biggest green flag in an investor is certainly how engaged they are really with your idea, the category, the space, wanting to understand you as a person, wanting to understand what you're really going after, what drives you, why you think it might succeed. Post-meeting, a lot of it's just speed and engagement. Like investors spend a lot of their life just meeting companies, and it is frequent that you will walk out of the meeting feeling pretty good and then hear nothing, right? That is a thing that happens, and that is an answer. Yeah. It may not be a great answer that you're looking for, but it is an answer. And so I think, post-meeting, a lot of it is just engagement. But during the meeting, it's how interested are they in understanding the way you think about the world?
Having been through a lot, what would you say is some of the red flags that you look for when you meet new investors?
There's the kind of things that are tropes, but they're tropes for a reason. I think if you're meeting an investor and they spend a lot of time asking you about other investors you've met who might be interested, who might want to do it, that's generally a sign they're a pretty weak investor. They may like your idea. It's just generally a sign that they're not a particularly kind of self-assured, confident investor in the world. So that's certainly one. Needing to bring in their partners early on, needing to, not wanting to. Wanting to is a great sign of excitement. Needing to is a sign that you're not talking to someone who can really help you in a big way. And, most of the time VCs say no, and most of the time entrepreneurs get told no. So it's, you get a lot of practice. I've been fortunate to get a lot of, data points of people saying yes, but I have far more data points of people saying no.
Yeah. How do you feel about fundraising? Would you say you love it or you dread it, or what would you say?
Fundraising is a fantastic opportunity for you to kind of, stand naked in front of the mirror and really see how the world sees your company. So whether you dread it or not probably has more to do with how you deep down know things are going at your company. So I will say I probably raised 30 rounds of venture capital where I was the primary guy raising the money. I've probably been associated with 50 or 60 in some way as a board member or something like that. And so, that's not a lot for a VC, but it's a good amount for a guy who's never been a VC. And I will say that when your business is doing well, fundraising is fantastic.
I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs who dread the process of it. But I think, like you said before, it's because it's so wrapped up in that fear of rejection and that fear of vulnerability.
It should be super energizing to meet with good VCs. It's one of the best parts about the entrepreneurial journey, getting to tell your story and get, effectively free feedback from some of the smartest people in the world. I would put it this way. If you knew ahead of time it was going to work out and your business was not going to go bankrupt, if that was somehow preordained, I don't think anyone would dislike fundraising. The issue with fundraising is actually not the process of fundraising. It's the built-in stress that if this does not work out, your dream is dead. Yep. So I understand that, and that is stressful. And so it's funny to say if you ignore kind of the most important thing. But if you ignore kind of the most important thing, fundraising is an opportunity to go around and meet with people who are super positive, who want the meeting to go well. Their fervent hope is the person in front of them is going to do something that will change the world and that will change their fortunes as a VC. Good VCs are the most kind of, maybe other than entrepreneurs, are the most kind of positive, hopeful people around. And they're hoping every day that they're meeting the next, I don't know, Uber or Stripe or Square or whatever. Name your successful tech company. And so, like I said, as long as you ignore the existential dread that everything is going to fall apart and your company's going to go bankrupt and you're going to be embarrassed and feel like you wasted years of your life and let down your employees. As long as you ignore that, fundraising is fantastic.
I love the optimism. I'm going to say that's rare. If I rewind for a minute, you were early on in Internet 1.0 with Flycast and ComScore and Wind Up.
Yeah. I was the first guy at a company in 96.
Yeah.
I think I joined the company before Netscape went public. So like a long time ago. I did not join a startup when I was 19 thinking like, oh, if this works out, I'll make lots of money. No one thought that back then.
Yeah, venture capital wasn't nearly the impact or the esteem that it is today.
There's been people venture investing for 100 years. But yes, it wasn't in the way that, I don't know, that your average American could name the top tier VCs in the country. The fame of, I don't know, Doug Leone or Mark Andreessen or Vinod Khosla is much larger today than the people 40 years ago. Those same level of prominence folks in the Valley 30 years ago were obviously not as nationally famous, for sure.
Yeah, and entrepreneurship wasn't quite at the level of folk heroism that I think it is today.
The difference now is just the scale of business. But I don't know that it's that different other than, frankly, internet scale, right? I mean, you just could not build a business as large as Google pre-internet. It just wasn't possible, right? You'd build the Yellow Pages in the Southeast. You'd build the Yellow Pages in California. You'd build the Yellow Pages in Germany. And then Google became the Yellow Pages for everything, right? And so the scale of success is obviously very different. But I actually think that's kind of, I don't know, very American and has been for a long time. The difference, like I said, is just the scale.
Yeah, the size of prize has gone way up. Let's talk about your background. You're somebody a lot of people look to for advice. You've been on a whole bunch of boards. You've been through, as you said, dozens of financing rounds and hundreds of millions of dollars. How did that journey and that transformation happen? How did you learn to fundraise?
There were no great decks on this or podcasts on this in 1997, right? But, I was very fortunate early in my career to both work with amazing founders at amazing companies growing fast with also great VCs. And so it is good early in your career if you can learn what great is. Yeah. When you're young, there's many upsides, right? Your risk tolerance and your ability to work for free, endure pain, all of that. But one of the downsides when you're young is you do risk not learning that much because the odds of the company you're joining or the odds of your idea working are just very low. And so you do risk learning some suboptimal lessons, but there's no perfect way to build a career.
Yeah, there's a lot I've learned from both the people around me who were incredibly good and also seeing the difference between when things didn't work out so well.
When you've been fortunate enough to see truly great, that is kind of indelibly inked in your brain going forward. To my point from earlier about how if you kind of know the fundraising is not going to go that well, if you have the memory of when things were easy, you can also tell yourself the truth when things are not going as well.
So early on, you had these experiences with really great investors, David Cowan, Fred Wilson, and others. That makes you really sharpen your view of the business. But what did you learn that actually made you a better fundraiser? And when you're coaching entrepreneurs, how do you help them establish that kind of playbook?
I think it's very important for entrepreneurs to have a very honest assessment of the actual quality of their business. They should know the pros and cons of their business better than anyone else. And ideally, you've started fixing the areas that are obviously problems before you go out and try and pretty your business up. But I think my biggest thing with entrepreneurs is spending a bunch of time with them saying like, hey, look, I'm not on your board. I'm not one of your biggest investors. Like, I'm also not, I don't work with you. I'm not one of your partners. You don't have to sell me on anything. Let's have a real conversation about what's the truth here. Like, what's the actual truth of the business? What is going well? What is going wrong? What do you need to believe about the future to believe your business will be better than it is today, or to believe your business will continue being the amazing business it is today into the future? And, are there things we obviously need to fix? Let's be honest about them now. Let's know. Great. We're done with that. Now, how do we want to tell the story? What is the story? What is the macro side?
A lot of the entrepreneurs I meet, they start thinking about the fundraise when it's time to put the PowerPoint slide together.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem is like, you should assume when you start your company, you will need capital again in the future. And so it's very important to be honest with yourself about the business. Like, I actually just don't believe that good fundraisers are some magicians that go into a room and, put together some amazing slides and they're able to sell it to people. Yes, you have to have great slides and a good personality and you have to build relationships. You have to follow up and people have to know you and you have to like you. But mostly it is the ground truth of the business that will help you raise money.
Do you ever find, though, that when you are asked for help with a company or meet with an entrepreneur who needs to start the raise, that you start digging in and you're like, hey, there's all these things we really got to work on the business?
100%. A decent chunk of the time, people have come to me for feedback or for VC intros or for help or for advice. And I have told them that they are far too smart and far too impressive to be wasting their time on the business they are working to build.
How does that go over?
Well, I always preface it with, I've been thinking about your business for 30 minutes and you've been thinking about it for 3 years. And so if I sway you, then something is wrong. You should know more about your business, but here's my input for you. And I bet I could find 40 emails in my inbox over the last 20 years of people emailing me 18 months later saying, you were totally right. Wow. Thank you. You're the only person who told me the truth. And by the way, sometimes I'm wrong and I hope I'm wrong. I preface all my advice with, I hope I'm horribly wrong.
Yeah.
It's very hard when you're an entrepreneur. You spend so much time believing what is going to be true in the future, which you have to. I would not have started my business today if I didn't have a way I think the world would look in the future and the role we would play in that world. So of course you have to convince yourself of something that is not true today that you believe will be true in the future. You have to do that, number one. Number two, you have to sell your employees. You have to sell your partners. You have to sell your co-founders. You have to sell prospects. And you have to sell customers. You sell all of these people that sometimes people can forget to kind of pay attention to what is actually true today. And the only way your business gets here is if you're really smart about what's actually true today and you work your way along that path. And it generally does not happen through luck. It generally happens through lots of hard work. That's why you've heard people say the ideas don't really matter. It's the execution that matters. The execution that's the hard part about building the business.
So in running the business, are you thinking about the business in the context of capital, kind of knowing, hey, look, for me to earn capital, I've got to be working on these things in the business.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, 100%. I say to founders all the time that dilution is the punishment for your poor execution. And I used to say that to my own team. If people would be sad about, the pre-money we got on a fundraise, I would say, look, I am also very disappointed that the term sheet came in at 100 pre and not 300 pre. Let's be honest with ourselves. The guy that gave us the term sheet isn't the bad guy. He's the good guy. He wants to give us money. It is our fault the business is worth $100 million, not $300 million. Yeah. Like, let's make sure this doesn't happen again.
So have there been times when you walked in and that kind of fact set of going, oh, I know this business isn't where I really want it to be financeable?
Of course.
What do you do in those situations?
I have no idea how anyone would be a good CEO if they did not fundamentally understand the truth of their business and what they're working on improving. I have no idea. I guess it is possible that there's someone out there who just lies to themselves, ignores the reality on the ground.
What do you think makes them miss it?
I think it's exciting to be a founder of a company. And you sit there and you'll see an amazing interview with Brian Armstrong or Vinod Khosla or Brian Chesky, and what those interviews often miss, because it's kind of boring, is the painstaking work it took to take Coinbase from some random idea to a company worth financing that now has, I don't know, however many billions of dollars in revenue and billions of dollars in market cap, or same thing with Airbnb or whatever. Like, Airbnb was not a couple dudes that has an idea about people renting out their couches, and now boom, it's worth $100 billion or whatever it's worth. Like, it was years and years and years of painstaking optimization of this pixel and this business model and this rate, and how do we deal with this? And people aren't really interested in it, of course, because it's less exciting than like, oh my God, they raised it 100 million. Oh, then they raised it $1 billion. Oh my God, the founder bought the Golden State Warriors or whatever. Like, that's all exciting and fun. And so I think most of the time founders spend a bunch of time getting excited about how amazing their life will be when their business is very successful. Mm-hmm. And some subset of founders spend a lot of time trying to improve the reality on the ground of their business to go on that path.
When you think about some of the toughest rounds you've had, what did you learn from them?
I have two answers to that. There's a few rounds in my life I can remember raising that by all rights, we probably shouldn't have been able to. And I think I learned two things from that. One, I'm a good fundraiser. And two, there can be a downside, because I wound up then wasting a couple extra years working on something that probably wasn't worth a few extra years working on it. So I think fundamentally, if your fundraise is way too hard, the odds that, okay, you got it closed and now the money is in the bank and all is good, the odds that that's going to have a truly happy ending aren't super high. They're not low, but they're not super high.
I mean, that's super interesting. That rounds that you may not have otherwise earned, except that you're particularly a good fundraiser. What makes you a good fundraiser?
I think at its core, you need to do a good job convincing people that you will become a magnet for good talent and for customers. And as long as they believe that, then they believe that that same thing will apply to someone wanting to buy your company. And I really don't think it's that much more complicated than that. Are you good at explaining your vision for the world and how what you're doing is going to make the world, look the way you think it will look in a few years?
And you over-index in it. So how do you do it? How do you do it, Russ, that you think is better than average?
I think if you can make people truly believe that you are telling them the truth, that goes a long way. Because what people really want is they want to believe your business will be huge, and they want to believe you're an honest partner to, partner with them on that journey. And so I think fundamentally believing you're very trustworthy and hardworking is a big deal, flat out. And then that you truly understand your market. And I think if you're very hardworking, trustworthy, and understand your market, that is very, very helpful. When entrepreneurship kind of blew up as a profession, I remember feeling at a certain point that we had gotten to this very weird spot where founders kind of treated it as if the investors were lucky to be allowed to be involved in their company, and they were lucky to be able to give them money. And that may be true a very small % of the time, but I do think a way young founders wind up bad fundraisers is their attitude going in is, this will be easy, man, VCs are dumb, it's a hassle, I even have to deal with these people. And so I try and do my best to beat that attitude out of people. Yeah. I think you have to go in the way you would go treat a customer, which is like, look at its core, I want success from this interaction. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to be a dick about it. I have said many, many, many times, and I really mean this, the most likely number of term sheets you will get when you go to do a fundraise is 0. The second most likely number of term sheets you will get when you do a fundraise is 1. There is some small % of the time you will get more than one term sheet and more than one option, and that is amazing, and that speaks to the quality of you as a fundraiser, but more importantly, you as a founder and what your business is. Yeah. And there's so much advice around how do we manage all these 5 to 10 VCs who all love me. And like, that's fine to have that advice. But I also think people spend so much time reading that advice that they forget the fact that you are so fortunate that anyone wants to bet on you, anyone wants to come work with you, anyone wants to partner with you. And I think if you can have that kind of, I don't know, inherent humility, when you pair that inherent humility with a fundamentally good business, you will be the most successful fundraiser.
This is a big tension for people. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard entrepreneurs saying, well, how long should I wait before I return any email? Do I need to wait 24 hours? I don't want to seem too interested. And how do I create FOMO?
Yeah, that's, to me, I think all of that nonsense is bullshit. Like, we're talking about raising seed A, B, and I think mostly if you're trying to create FOMO as a way to raise money from investors, it's either A, not going to work, or B, it's only going to work on shitty investors. I think fundamentally, I mean, the investors that care who else is involved are the shitty investors, right? Like, fundamentally, the way you get great investors to bet on you is seeming like you're a great bet. And I'm sure there are examples of people that were standoffish in fundraising who were then successful. They were not successful because they were standoffish in fundraising, right? Famously, there's some amazing stories about Mark Zuckerberg for his Series A showing up 40 minutes late to partner presentations in pajama pants.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, it turned out he built the greatest business that anyone has created in the last 25 years. You can overcome showing up in pajama pants. Sure. But Facebook did not succeed because Mark showed up
and I think I hear a lot of emphasis on making people feel like they're lucky to get in, like you were talking about. And yet I see very few times when those things work.
Yeah, I just don't think they work. I think at its core, if you have a business that needs capital, it is very stupid to not have a very wide top of funnel. If you have a business that needs customers, I don't spend a lot of time turning away potential customers. I don't spend a lot of time turning away potential investors. Now, as you move things down the funnel, maybe you will be lucky enough. I've had financing rounds where I was very fortunate to have a lot of great options and I was able to be more selective. And I've certainly had financing rounds where, man, thank God I took that meeting with that random junior person at that random fund no one had ever heard of, because holy shit, they were the only one that showed up at the finish line. And this company would not exist were it not for those people.
Having been through this so many times, what do you think venture investors are looking for?
I think every venture investor is a very hopeful person who shows up for work every day, hoping they will invest in the next giant company. And I think what gets them to yes is, do I buy this vision for the future? Do I buy this person has and will be able to put together a team to take a crack at that vision of the future? And do I believe they will kill themselves to make it a reality? But I think mostly at their core, VCs are super positive people who want to find the vision of what is next in the future and want to back it, not just for their own personal professional success, but they genuinely get excited about doing it. Being a VC is a relatively bad way to make money in the world of finance. Right? There are other probably safer ways to make money in the world of finance, to make lots of money. But to me, there's nothing more interesting than that initial spark of like, this is a human being here who she is telling me a story about how the world is going to look in 10 years. And do I think her story is plausible? And do I think she might be able to put together a team and attract enough capital to give it a run? There's nothing more exciting than that. And man, it's fun to be right. Like, it's not just lucrative to be right. It's fun to be right. So I think genuinely, like I said, if you deep down don't think of these people as potential partners on your journey and don't have a fundamental appreciation for people that want to be your partners, man, you better get really good at faking it.
You show up that way, right? Back to your kind of over-indexing.
Yeah, I at its core, I still, after all of these years doing it, am fundamentally appreciative when people want to be a customer of mine, want to work for me, and consider investing in my company. And I think if you aren't fundamentally appreciative of those things, you better get really good at faking those things.
A lot of what you're saying is these attributes of humility and honesty. I hear some candor. Is that character or is that skills?
I think humility is a weird thing because I think humility is wonderful. I'm sure there are people who are wildly confident and cocky. My point is, I think it's amazing to have a ton of confidence in yourself as a founder and a ton of confidence in the business you're going to build. But also, you are hoping that that person at Greylock or USV or Andreessen Horowitz or Sequoia, or you name your fund, you are hoping that they will want to partner with you for many years. And I think, I think that's exciting. And I do not think you should treat those people at its core like they're lucky to be your partners.
Yeah.
I think what you ultimately want is you ultimately would like your VC to believe they are lucky you agreed to accept their money, but you can't treat them like that. And the easiest way to not treat them like that is to have that not be your honest feeling. And if it is your honest feeling, you should probably get good at hiding it. I mean, sure, there are things about my style that probably work well and could probably work better. But I think at its core, even the best fundraisers that you've ever read about, at its core, they were appreciative. You've never heard a story about them treating their investors on the way in like assholes. Now, they may have had famous fallouts later with them, right? Famously, Uber had quite a fallout with their investors later. But if you read any of the contemporaneous accounts of the early days of Uber, it's, Travis and Garrett again and again being able to attract capital and seeming from the outside like they were quite appreciative of the people that agreed to partner with them. Yes, some of those partnerships went poorly later. I'm not ignoring that. Of course, that's not my point. My point is on the front end, if you could, go back and interview Travis circa 2010, he was excited that, Benchmark or Menlo or whomever, invested with him.
Yeah. If you were to rewind your own journey and kind of take what you've learned after dozens of rounds and having worked in Silicon Valley across a lot of different businesses, what would you tell your younger self?
I have never heard a story of a great business that failed because it couldn't raise capital. I don't think they exist in Silicon Valley. I think that stories founders tell themselves, and it's bullshit. If you have a business worth being able to attract capital, it will be able to in any market. You may not love the terms. When I was helping early on as an executive helping build Comscore, we raised 2 flat rounds and 1 down round after September 11th, and it was brutal. It was brutal financing. I was at a company early on where one of the partners from one of the preeminent firms in Silicon Valley pulled a term sheet in 96, and the company had a couple weeks of capital left, and it later went public and was bought for many billions of dollars. I think there's so much money in the private investing world, even in bad markets, that I truly do not believe anyone can point to an example of a fundamentally great business that couldn't raise money because of the cycle or the market or the whatever. There's too many great investors and there's too much capital looking for great businesses. So I think mostly what happens is these stories that people view as horror stories are mostly what you actually should have done is made sure you had a great business. The way you build a company that people buy for lots of money is you build a company that is doing well and you do not need to sell. When you need to sell your company, is there some chance you will be able to trick someone into buying it? Probably, but more often than not, no. Right? The way you build a company that can go public is you build a company that can go public. You build something that can sustain on its own and can attract capital and can attract great employees. And so I think at its core, if you have kind of a mediocre team and a mediocre business, the odds that you will get a top tier VC because some tip I gave you on Razor's Edge is zero.
Yeah. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean the bad markets aren't pretty brutal.
I think literally everything about building a business is hard, including attracting capital. Everything is hard. I think, look, being successful at anything is hard. We all have friends that are high-level athletes. That's hard. We have friends that are, great investors. That's hard. If you built your general contracting business from nothing, that is hard. There's lots and lots of general contractors in the city. Most of them don't become very successful. There's lots of people that want to start businesses. Most of them don't become very successful. Literally everything is hard. All you can do is work very, very, very hard and try and be open to feedback and try and improve.
I think the most important piece that you're talking about is this piece of getting the business to genuinely be worth investing in. Because by the time you're writing the PowerPoint slides, a lot of that's too late.
Look, this doesn't have to turn into a dating advice podcast. And God knows I don't have any particular dating advice. I've been married for a very long time. I suspect the best way to be able to find a partner, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, is to be someone who's worth dating in the first place. I got married before Match.com was a thing. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff you could do on your Match.com or Hinge or I don't know, all the other dating sites. I'm sure there's lots of things you can do in your profile. But at its core, hopefully you will first of all be someone worth partnering with. And then I'm sure there's lots of advice on, maybe I shouldn't wear a hoodie or something. And by the way, it's like with founders, like if you build a good business, it will work out fine.
And it's hard to make it through diligence without having a whole lot more than a great PowerPoint deck. So
yes, correct. A smart investor will eventually figure out, and someone you're able to trick, you will eventually regret having them on your board.
yep. Russ, you're awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation a ton.
This is a lot of fun. Talk to you.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye. The thing that sticks out to me from my conversation with Russ is that in fundraising, there is a real advantage to being real. If you own where you actually are, the good, the messy, the hard stuff, and you deal with it head on, it is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Like Russ said, it is not about polished decks. It is not about clever tricks. It's about building something that's truly worth investing in and creating partnerships with investors that actually work. If you got something out of this episode, hit subscribe so that you won't miss any of the conversations that are coming up, and drop a review if you'd be so kind. And for extra behind the scenes insights from this conversation with Russ and many others, I would love it if you could follow us on Substack. Thanks again for listening to Razor's Edge. See you next time.